Welcome to another History Lives presentation from the Dickinson County Museum. We appreciate the fact that all of you choose to come here. And just want to remind you of our mission, which is inspiring engagement by preserving our past. And this History Lives series is a big part of what we do to focus on that mission. So thank you. Just a couple of housekeeping things. The restrooms are in there, and there are 2 exits, one back that way and one this way, if you need to skedaddle in a hurry for any reason. Just a couple of announcements also. We have been gifted. We have been challenged, is a better way to put this. We have been challenged. An anonymous donor, about a month ago, said that he would give us $5,000 to enhance and improve our exhibits if we raised $5,000. And we've been asked, how are we doing on this challenge? Well, as of this afternoon, we have just a hair over $5,000. So we went back to the donor and we said, would you be willing to up the ante a bit? And he said yes. So our challenge is $7,000 now. So if you didn't have a chance, if you didn't have a chance to feed the basket a little bit, the money from the basket tonight is going to go towards this challenge. No pressure at all, just pass it around as you're filling out your wallets. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Another way to support the museum is by becoming a member. And we do have our brochures around, and there are memberships forms within there. There are different levels of membership, but that is a great way to support the work that we do here. Yes. Thank you, Vanna. This word is. No, you're Vanna.
Oh, Vanna. Oh, yeah.
Vanna. Yes, yes. So we do have these brochures. You can grab one when you leave if you'd like. Any questions before we get started? Turning off your cell phone might be a good thing to do also. Except for Dawn. Our speaker tonight is Jonathan Reed, who many of you know and have met here before because I believe this is his 3rd History Lives presentation. He is a noted local historian and author, and he also is a professional one who goes down the rabbit hole to do research on any questions I ask him or anybody else asks him about the area. Tonight he's going to be talking about the town of Arnolds Park, not the park of Arnolds Park, but the town of Arnolds Park. You're welcome to ask questions whenever you want. These are really informal. There'll probably be time for some conversation at the end. So, are we ready, Jonathan?
I don't know.
Technology is not our best side. Yeah. Hey Russ, how you doing?
How you doing, Mary?
Good.
So rotate your phone, just it.
I think that's it.
I think that's it too.
Come on in.
Marshall's working.
Ready to roll?
It usually takes a minute or 2. I'll be into 6 slides by the time that Facebook finishes.
Come on in. Awesome. Okay. Lights?
Okay, lights please.
Yep, there's plenty over here would be great. Light, you can come tonight.
Over there or here? Are we in your way?
Nope, got it all you. Yep.
What's this, John?
Oh, that's cool.
Can I sit here?
Absolutely.
I think that's nice and bright. Can everybody see the screen? I'll be in the way of you people. I'll try to walk around quite a little bit here so that we're not doing anything. Yeah, tonight's discussion, presentation, whatever you want to call it, is what happens when I go down the rabbit hole, as Mary talks about it. Somebody asked me one question about a building in uptown Arnolds Park. And that led to trying to find out more about that building, understanding what businesses were in there, who might have owned it, and then, oh wait, next door there's another building. So you can see it just keeps going on and on and on. But as I say with my little subtitle here, it's everything you could want in a small town. And you think about what's uptown in Arnolds Park right now on Broadway. What have we got? You know, I mean, at one end you've got a Bible conference, and you've got the other end some bars and pizza places. And it's, well, is that everything you want in a small town? Now, it wasn't the case years ago. In fact, when I was growing up and coming around here, I had a cousin, in fact, who was a girl, was told, when you're at the Emporium, you don't walk down to the amusement park on that path. You go out to the street and go that way. Because I'm sure her mother would have said something out of Star Wars. You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. We must be cautious. Well, in the late 60s and 70s, that was probably sound advice, no doubt about it. So what have we got here today? We've got a share of bars, taverns, establishments. We're going to mention a little bit about Bogie Nights and its predecessor. I'll talk about Frenchie's Parlor. Muriel's Peacock. You know, the Peacock Lounge started by Muriel. Did she? Yes, she had a hideaway bar. The police would come and bust her for selling booze after hours, and they'd come and confiscate her liquor. And after they left, she'd look around and then turn the liquor cabinet around with fresh bottles. Even Red's Cafe was reported to have slot machines on the second floor. So was it like that all the time? Well, you have to think about it historically, which for me means starting back to dirt, practically. This is from 1911. Obviously, the amusement park was not there yet in the way we think about it, but it was platted as such. This is Zephyr Drive. It's the way the original plats went. But the town of Arnolds Park, oh, wait, I can do this. The town of Arnolds Park, as we think about it, it was about right there. And you can't beat the location. You had the railroad coming right along, the Milwaukee Railroad. Of course, you had the train station. When people would be on the Milwaukee Railroad after hours and hours of trying to get to Okoboji, finally they'd see, well, actually the first thing they'd see would be Mr. Arnold's water slide. And then he had a hotel, and the lake is out there beyond it. I mean, talk about a payoff as you come into Arnolds Park. But years came along, and time happened, and things happened. As you can see here, our Minneapolis and St. Paul Railway went there. The Emporium was there, and then from Red's Cafe all the way down to Chaplin's Cottages, there was a whole hive of businesses and schools. And also, this map from 1941 was showed the tent they would put up. Kind of semi-permanently. But Arnolds Park was first and foremost a community. It wasn't a tourist thing per se. I mean, we had a school. I would give anything to walk through the halls of that school today. I mean, look at the windows. It must have been, estimate that about 1920, put up in the teens. It must have been fantastic and full of all kinds of atmosphere. By 1955, it had been added on to substantially, somewhat, and then by 75, not too many years before closing, added on much more substantially after that. But that was not the first school. Yeah, the first one was a wooden frame building. It was on the same location, and the wooden frame building had a construction cost of a little over $2,000. And just in case you were wondering, about 1898, when they first opened, students would be charged $1.50 per month to receive an education. Not bad at all. There was no public support of schools at that time. If you wanted to go to school, you paid for We're going to learn a little more about this building in a couple of minutes too. Okay, so I mentioned the train. Arnolds Park greeted visitors. You know, that we have this wonderful upscale depot. I think I say one here was 1883. No, the railroad came in 1882 there. They had a platform in 1883, and then this was actually built closer to 1900. And then a few years later, the Okoboji Hotel was built there. And you can just see the dance hall in the background of these photos. The dance hall would be the Central Ballroom, and it was immensely popular. And it predated, in fact, the Roof Garden Ballroom. So, there are a couple of photos that we're going to spend a lot of time on, and I'm just going to put this one up here. This is one of my favorite photos of the downtown Arnolds Park area. It was a panoramic photo taken by Alf Williams, my favorite tourist photographer, probably about 1917. And he had this unique wide-angle camera that caught all of this. And the wonderful thing about this, it was staged, I'm sure of it. You wouldn't have people standing just in the absolute perfect places for the photo. But so he staged people and he got them there. But he knew what he wanted to do. He was a tourist photographer. He wanted to have people look at the area and want to come here. So this was, as I said, a staged photograph, but showing just the array of things. And this was in Broadway of Arnolds Park when the amusement park was just hitting its stride down the way a little bit. So let's take a look at some of these things that we can see on this wonderful image. You've got the Central Ballroom here. I've seen an interior photograph. Oh my God, it was a drafty 2x4. It looked, I mean, it was just a big cavernous space. I can't imagine, well, I wouldn't want to be dancing in there on a cold day as you sometimes get at Okoboji. But I mean, it was just largely an open space. And then through the years it evolved. Originally it had a restaurant down the bottom that didn't do very well, sadly. And then after the hotel that I pointed out had burned in 1911, they put in an ice cream parlor. And I thought this was just around for a year or two. And then I saw today that actually another photograph shows it into the 1920s. So one cool thing about this, if you didn't know it, you got to the dance hall by walking along a raised walkway because the shore dropped down so much. Kind of ahead of its time. Now, I've done this presentation before and people raise their hand and go, "Now, where is that?" You all probably know. But that's sort of the current view today.
Oh, okay.
Nice, that's why I did that. Yeah, okay. So that would be the current view today. So let's move on a little farther on that. Let's take a look at the railroad depot. As I said, actually, it was just a platform. In 1883, they finally built this lovely structure about 1900. And that was a railroad investment for sure. You will see photographs, and I will thank Don for pointing this out to me. You'll see photographs of railroad depots, and understand if it's ours, you need to look at the crown right there, because they had some, I'll call them dragon's teeth on the top. Very Victorian for that time. So, standing in the same place, looking at the same view, there we are. Okay, so you're looking at West Oaks on the lakefront for that. Go a little farther. Okay, this is where you go down the hill. The fish market here, just read the man's name, don't have it in front of me anymore. The fish market, tenant's dry cleaner, and a real estate office here. I can tell you this, the fish market was around for about 15 years. The operator here would buy fish from people who'd go out. There were fishermen who'd go out, start a summertime or even a seasonal commercial business, and they'd haul in as much as they could possibly get. And go to the fish market, and he would buy it, put it on ice, and sell it. I believe he would buy his fish for 12 cents a pound. So when you're out there fishing and you get the big one, you really want that. And it was not uncommon for fishermen to come in and have 3 or 4 buckets and giving them 100 pounds or more fish every day. Charlie Tennant had a dry cleaner. This was probably just a drop-off place because he had other places as well. But you have to love the name, the Pantatorium. I would take my clothes to the Pantatorium, just for the name of it. You know, and so then that's the view of the same thing today. Obviously, nothing where the first two was, and then Bombazi is now occupying that part. Now, as we continue on that long thing, we had a commercial hotel. This was actually the Arnolds Park schoolhouse, the one that I showed you that had 1898 at the bottom. They cut it in two and moved it up to this location in 1915. And it was a commercial hotel by the day, by the week, or by the season, depending on what your needs were. Perfect location, right across from the railroad tracks, you know, and the station. So if you got up there, you knew you could be assured of at least trying to find a place to stay. I love this part of the photo for one reason, another reason. Not just the great building that was there, and it was all wood, as you saw from the construction. But here you've got a man talking to somebody in an open window. And what is this open lot here? It's just an open lot. It would be another 5 years or more until the Arnolds Park Savings Bank would be there. And we'll show you what that looked like. But don't you love the cars?
Yes.
You know? But that was destroyed by fire in 1932, and it went up like that. There was no saving it at all, being an older wooden structure. But, you know, I mean, wow. It just gets me when I look at that. So, what is that view today? Okay, yeah, oh, look at that. That open lot, that's now the restaurant portion of Captain's Getaway. You know, and then it would have been right here, where the hotel was. And all the way up the street, yeah. We look much more different today. In fact, these modern views of uptown Arnolds Park almost looks like the imagined future of Back to the Future. You know, it's like, no, it would never look like that. Oh, but it does. So we'll continue a little bit farther on the far right side of that photo. So one thing that you can, we got drugstores here, the Olsen brothers, the Olsens, who eventually moved on to other things. And then over here is the Palma Cafe. We'll be talking about that in a little bit as well. So this right now is, well, I don't have to tell you what is there now, I can show you. So here we go, Smokin' Jake's.
Oh, yeah.
Occupied that whole area right there. And that business building was torn down in 1936. That was Man Smith's store that was there. His son's wife, Eloise, that name ring a bell with anybody here? She had a general store here as well. And we're just going to pay a little attention to that thing peeking through there. That's going to show up in a few more pictures. So, I mentioned the Olsen brothers. That actually became Brooks' store. Yes, the Brooks who started the Brooks Golf Course. They came and they bought the store from the Olsen brothers, and then eventually moved on. Then they moved on to be Brooks. What can you say about these things? I mean, take a look at the good old days, people. It was a little dirty. It was gravel or street or dusty roads. Yeah, it could have used a little paint, for sure. And you know, that hadn't been painted probably since, War of 18, who knows, but a long time. But I really, really love this next photo that I'm going to show you, because this, for me, embodies all that a small town should have, and Arnolds Park did have. I love that. Let's take an in-depth look at what we're looking at here. On the left, we've got Barton's Bakery. This was probably taken in the 1920s, as you can see. Now, Barton's, they were not just a walk-in, and buy a loaf of bread bakery. They were kind of a commercial baker, and they sold their bread and rolls to all around the lakes area. They eventually moved around the corner, and then in this swell of time, went out of business. The Star Theater, started by, A.C. McKinney in 1920 something. I was going to say 1920. Obviously, the talkies came in 1929, but I mean, this was first-rate entertainment uptown too, not down at the amusement park with all the sideshow stuff. This was mainstream entertainment at the Star Theater. Then you have the grocery store next door, you know, and let's see, milk, delicatessen, plumbing. Plumbing? Well, why not? Then the Lake Hotel next to that, with the meat market next to that, and then a barber shop. I mean, we had everything you could want when you got off the train, or when you came to visit, or when you lived here. Because even in the 1920s, even as late as the 1930s, for people who lived way down in that newly developing area around the monument, with all those little cottages that went up there, if you didn't have a ready means to come up here and carry your groceries back with a car, with a wagon, with kids, then you had to use one of the little local shops that crept up here. And I also love this photo for something else here. I'm going to point it out to you. If you know Smokin' Jake's, you'll see as you stand in front, the brick changes for about 8 feet, where there's like an ice cream shop here. It says lunches right there. Who knows when that was put up? I'd love to find that out. Which raises another question. Depending on who you talk to, I either have it on good authority or I have nothing but lies to tell you on this. But some people have said, from that department store there, over across, under the street, over to the Emporium or the train station is a tunnel. I think what we have now is you can look at one end of that and see maybe a little storage area where they cut in. You go to the other side over at the Emporium, you'll see a little area where they cut in. Did it ever connect? I don't know. But more intriguing, a tunnel's a pretty big deal. Why wasn't it in the newspapers? I have no answer for that. You know, so I mean, would I love to find out definitively? Heck yes, because that's good to know. And then you know, if you're wondering, if you've lost your area of understanding where we are now, this is the exact view today. Yeah, much changed. You know, with the Bogie Knights, Birdside Nautical, Captain's Entertainment Complex, upper and lower levels, and then Smokin' Jake's over there. And then Murphy's, and we're going to walk down to that end of the, let's walk down to that end of the Broadway for a little bit, shall we? Okay. I was given a box of photographs from somebody whose ancestors lived in town. This was a year ago. I got really, really excited. And then I turned the pictures over, and nobody wrote anything on the back. Well, except for out of 200 pictures, maybe 5. You know, or it helps. It never helps to write Uncle Joe on the back of the picture. Uncle Joe who? But there were a few things that I was able to recognize, and this got me going, as Mary says, down the rabbit hole. 1914, Thomas Jenkins had completed a large new building, first with a barber shop and a billiard parlor. Later on in the year, he built a second story on top of it. Okay. Thomas Jenkins went on to run an ice business. He went on to be a partner with Bennett's. It was Jenkins and Bennett's Amusement Park. But this was the beginning of his entrepreneurship. So what happened? 1915, he found a buyer. What could be better? So he sold the building and the lot to this family that was coming into town. And the family was an older gentleman in his 50s, his wife, and their 2 children, grown children, Minnie and Bonnie, Bonnie being a man. Now, here's what we think with this photo, and I love this photo. They bought at the end of the year. They bought like December. I think this is a, hey, look what we did photo. If I had to guess, I'm going to say that's Bonnie the barber right there. And up in the windows, I'm going to say that that's Edwin Chaplin right there. I'm going to say that that's Minnie, and then that's the mom. We don't know though. Nobody ever identified it. but the building is certainly recognizable. Oh, it doesn't look familiar? How about this? Oh, people spent time at the Hilltop. Yeah, yeah. Through the years, it became the Hilltop Lounge, and as I note here, it was burned in August 1990. It had really, really bad wiring, and it was kind of no surprise to anyone when it finally came up and was not salvageable. Okay, so we know where that is here. There's a little wall right there. We're going to come back and talk to that. Okay, so here we have the rooming house, started by Edwin Chaplin. And again, I think that's Bonnie there. But they also started the White Star Cafe. And if you look closely, you can see maybe some employees there. Maybe that's Hattie Chaplin. We don't know. But we do know in 1919 they opened the White Star Cafe. I think that was in late April or May. In June, Mr. Chaplin was out front. He was having himself some dinner late at night. Hattie had been cooking in the back. And suddenly the door bursts open. A man comes in with a gun. Give me all your money. Okay, deal. So he reaches into the cash register, gives the man all his money, about $12, and then the man runs out. What the man didn't know was that Hattie had just taken probably $300 worth of day's receipts to the bank. He was just a little late. But they survived, and the White Star Cafe existed under many guises for many years as well, after the Chaplins moved on. For instance, the Arnolds Park building. You can tell from the overall construction and all of that, but in case you have any doubts, there is a White Star that was put there. Now, the thing I like about the Chaplin family was that they came to town with the vision of being somebody in town. Edwin Chaplin had numerous businesses in his life, both real estate and operating other storefronts. His wife, Hattie, I was never able to figure out what any businesses she had, but it was a family affair, definitely. Edwin Chaplin and Hattie, when they got married, he adopted her two children that she had from a previous marriage. And we don't know, all I can tell you about her first marriage was that, and I looked this up, down in Orange City where she came from, her first husband filed for divorce. She counterfiled for divorce. The judge called them both into chambers. The judge looked at their two documents that they had, and then proceeded to tell them, I know you both personally, you've both been bad. That's all we can say. You've both been bad. I suggest you just call it off. I will grant you each a mutual divorce. Done deal. So here we are with the Chaplin family, with, I think, employees or relatives. Edwin Chaplin was known as Dad. Dad Chaplin. Stogie in his mouth. That looks like a dad to me.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking that maybe that's Hattie Chaplin. We don't know. But I do know that that's Minnie. Because finally, after looking through all those pictures, I was able to find one that said Minnie on the porch. And it was that girl. Edwin died in 1925. And this is what makes their story even more remarkable. Hattie Chaplin went on to do great things in Arnolds Park as a now widowed woman taking care of herself and her family. And she at one time, in addition to having the White Star Cafe, well here, I'll just go spread this out a little bit. That's the current view of the Chaplin block. So that was where they lived. They built that house. They had the rooming house here. They have the Perk. And then in 1940 or so, they built this building, which is now the wine bar building. Okay, this was kind of the anchor of a lot of things that they had. I mean, they had businesses here, 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 and lived there. So they had money coming in. You think about the businesses that were in here. I know people talk about the electrical company was there. The barber shop moved from there into here as well for a while. Bonnie had his barber business there. By the way, the barber business, he actually gave Jack Dempsey a haircut, 1939. But through being at the right place at the right time, having some community mindedness, she was asked, would you care to take over our, excuse me, would you care to take over our now weed-infested campground that we have here? Well, about 1918, the city fathers thought, man, cars are getting much more interesting, you know, people are using them, they're coming by car and not by train, and people camp out. And indeed, that was the fact, you'd go camping instead of something else. So, 1918, the city fathers took all the land that went over there, all the way to the water tower, practically, and they made a campground out of it. Some of us probably still remember that campground, because it was around until, what, the 90s? But Hattie Chaplin took it over, hired some guys to clean it up, put in showers, put in a laundry service, built a couple of cabins in addition to her own, and made it a real place that enabled it to still be viable and be a good place to come camp up until the 1970s. But she sold it a few years later for about a $500 profit. Okay. Now, the one thing I love about Arnolds Park, I mean, we are very compact. Look at all the buildings here. Just boom, 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 boom. You've got the lakefront. You've got the train station right there. I mean, it is very, very compact. I need somebody, perhaps Don can tell me at some point, what that tall, multi-story building is, because that is not there anymore. It might have been the mattress factory if you have that on your handouts, but I can't tell definitively from the drawings. Oh, by the way, I love aerial photographs, if you haven't noticed. So here, after they tore down the ice cream shop and made the central ballroom huge, they built it all the way back. You know, as you can see, there was even docks, and through the years somebody would occasionally try to put another restaurant in there. It didn't work. So this copyright 1929, you can see the what is now Smokin' Jake's. You can see what was at that time still Olson's store. And then we've got the others. The wine bar gallery is right there, post office. And here's that multi-story building I don't know. It's just great fun. The bank is there, and then the hotel. But what a compact little business area that we had. Oh, and these are not everything that we had. Let's move ahead a few years. Who remembers? If you show of hands, American Legion post. Anybody remember going through there? How about the Blue Note? Or it's the Blue Room, its predecessor. Kelso's Bar? Ooh, that was only around for a couple of years. Replaced by the Lux Martini Bar. Really, the Willys, one season. And I don't think it even made it a full season. That was in Rubens Theater area. And Rubens Theater, who knows who Reuben was? Reuben was the dog. Yeah, he was the dog. Then we had the Windjammer Lounge, the Relay Station, Master and Rose, as we start going down the road here. Shepherd's Gate Coffee House, they moved eventually into the bank building. Okay. In that area for years, there was just like open space. Sand volleyball court was what it sort of became. Eloine's store, I mentioned hers already. Scuba and Ski. Scuba and Ski was actually in the back of Master and Rose and the Master and Rose. Hey, you know, you get your money where you can. New Athens store, never found anything else about the New Athens store. Somebody I'm welcome to understand what it was. Again, I think it was only around for about a year. Fitzmurphy's became Murphy's. Sheba's Doghouse, the Silver Ceiling Bar, another one that only lasted a little short time. And then the Hilltop Lounge, and then the Arnolds Park Campground. I mean, looking over time, we've had a lot of entrepreneurs who figured, I'm the one, I can make all the money, I'm going to have the big place. Obviously, that didn't work for everyone. Hold on, quick drink. Okay, so let's talk about some of these in more modern times. The American Legion Hall. It was the Lou Wright Garage. He started it in the late teens, early 20s, and he kept it going all the way up until 1946. There was another building out in front of this. 1950, Don Reason bought it, and they ended up making this the permanent Legion on there. Why isn't it there now? That's why. By 1998, they had only 4 members in the Arnolds Park American Legion. So sad. So they turned the property back to the city in exchange for property taxes and water and sewer not paid all those years. It worked okay probably for everybody, because now we have a parking lot. And you think, oh, a parking lot? No, Arnolds Park needs a parking lot. But goodness gracious, you know, the old days, you know, the 20s and 30s, oh boy, even in the early days, you saw that one building needed a little paint. Oh boy, I mean to tell you, it wasn't all roses. Welcome to the 1970s and early 80s. Yeah, the theater, yeah. I'm sorry, I would not go to that strip club, which was what that was. Excuse me, exotic dancers. Exotic dancers. No, I'm not brave enough to go into that place. But, I mean, people yet have fond memories about, oh, how great Arnolds Park was when I was a kid, when we were kids. Maybe not so much. You know, we just didn't see the weeds and the dirt and the broken sidewalks. So, but, you know, the bank building stayed on, very sturdy structure, nothing is going to go bad with that. This was the post office. Clara's Clutter Closet, right there. One of my favorite places. I always loved Clara's Clutter Closet. But Iowans, you know, as things started to change, Iowans got a little more interested in not having the accoutrements that you think of as a small town. We don't need a newspaper. We don't need a manufacturing facility here, mattresses. We don't need another one, neon bulbs. We don't need all of that because we became a little more vacation-y oriented. And then we started getting some more restaurants going in here. We were previously in a bed retail. Okay, Master and Rose Restaurant was in this location, and then the relay station. I think I ate there once or twice. If my dad was buying, possibly, we like steak. Other things, you can see here how time goes on. Relay station, by the way, big old Oldsmobile right there. And then the Windjammer Lounge, or disco if you prefer, if it was in the 70s. Mike Hopper actually opened that a little down the street a little bit and then moved the next year. Maxwell's Restaurant. Yes, the original Maxwell's Restaurant was there. And then you've got Sheba's Doghouse, signed for that. No, well, they didn't sell dogs there, but they sold hot dogs. Okay, we're getting a little bit closer here. So we've got the relay station. Again, now we're all paved. Obviously, there's nothing built in here for decor, it's just grass. Then you've got Maxwell's Restaurant. Max Corey opened that in '77. Became Yesterday's in 1986. Wow, that's almost hard to believe. Dwayne Zarodnik, when he came to town, realized there's an opportunity here. And what's that blue building on the right? Here, let me get a little closer. We're not there yet, but that blue building, that was Frenchie's Parlor. Okay, now I ask people who remembers this. I'm not going to embarrass anybody and ask who went to Frenchie's Parlor. But a lot of people wonder, whatever happened to that? So actually I did a little research. In 1978, Darwin Andre incorporated Frenchie's Parlor, and it is a massage parlor in the 70s version of that. It was one of 2 on Broadway, but we're only going to talk about that one right now. Actually, the other one was on the other side at the top floor of the Hilltop Lounge. But as you can tell, by the late 1970s, early 1980s, it was looking kind of seedy, I guess I'd say. You know, we saw the other end with the auto parts store there. So, what happened? Society changed. I guess I'd say binge drinking among young people became more common. Fights broke out. The campground, instead of being a lovely place where people would go to, spend a week or so with their family, became a place for hippies and the like to hang out for a while and do God knows whatever hippies did. But for sure there were people that disagreed and fights would get out. So in the mid-1980s, by the research this, a group of concerned citizens, calling them the Citizens Against Porn Committee, they lobbied Arnolds Park to pass morality laws and limit obscenity and all these other things here. Well, eventually there was probably a sting of some sort, and Frenchie's went under, and also so did the Cosmopolitan. Some people have asked me about that part that we saw on the screen, that's where Dwayne's yesterday's teppanyaki room is. How did that get from Frenchie's to Dwayne's teppanyaki room? Dwayne's Erotic had tried for years to try to buy it from Frenchie. But it was just an ugly, brick building, right? And he wouldn't sell it until he got arrested. And they have it on good authority that Dwayne's Erotic went into the jail, made Frenchie an offer, and they shook hands through the bars. And so that's how yesterday's got to be there. But when we posted this picture of the Hilltop Lounge, people were commenting, "Oh, you don't want to know what went on there." Oh, well, depending on the year, yeah, you probably don't want to know what went on there. But remember what it was. I mean, it was a legitimate business, cafe, pool hall. You could get your hair cut there. They had rooms that you could rent by the week or the month. I mean, it was definitely okay, and definitely above board. But society changed. The Hilltop Lounge became a neighborhood hangout, and then sometimes things with the tourists coming in wouldn't work so well. So eventually when it burned, some people cried, some people didn't. So, but I love to look at this photo of all that we have to offer here, and this is again from 1941, with a little bit of the amusement park there and the roof garden. Arnolds Park was truly a remarkable place through the years. It wasn't just bars. It wasn't just places to get a bite to eat. I mean, we had everything that the town wanted. We had a savings bank, high school, garages. We had movie theater, food store, pool halls, hardware store, restaurants, newspaper office. I mean, we were a small town in Arnolds Park. And that's what I want people to try to understand here, that things change over time, and when they do, sometimes they change for the worse, sometimes the wave comes around and they change for the better. Me, I happen to like the bars and restaurants that are up there now. But then again, I'm also in bed by 10 o'clock. So that's about all I've got to say on this. I want to thank you all for coming. I'll entertain any questions or comments. I won't know the answers. But if you would like to ask anything additional, feel free. Anything? Okay. I guess I covered it well. Please turn on the lights.
Surely you got questions.
You didn't go over the grocery store uptown. When did that close, or do you know anything about that?
Actually, there were a couple of grocery stores uptown, depending on the year. And Mansmith's, I want to say that closed after World War II, but I do not remember when.
Still there. Madison's was still there into the late 60s.
Late 60s? No, Eloine's had her store there, but it wasn't a grocery store.
It was a variety store.
It was a variety store.
And the grocery store was still there.
Yeah, Bud's Foodland was up in that area too.
Foodland, and I worked for Vance Market in
Yeah.
Okoboji, and we would do some exchanges with
Yeah.
things at times. And the little drugstore, sundry place was there
Yep.
still.
I had a buddy in high school that worked in a grocery store on Main Street and lost these 3 fingers in a meat grinder. When he was in high school, so that's had to have been like 62, 3, 4, somewhere in there.
No, I have to say, a lot of my information comes from the newspapers, not individual memories, because one, it's way too much work to talk to everybody, and not always will you agree. But I will say this, about after World War II, and definitely in the 50s and 60s, newspapers started getting iffy with regard to accuracy and including the pertinent data. So a lot of things can get by me. But I'm just here to entertain. I'm not here to write the definitive history on it. What else you got? Hey, does anybody know about the so-called tunnel? Okay. Yeah, that's it. For me, it's going to be folkloric at this point. I'm not sure it exists. And why, when newspapers were still good, did they not write about it? You know, that's just too good to put in the paper. So, anything else? Okay.
I was just going to mention to you, you said that the bakery moved on to Allen Street. It was in the building where the exploiting bar is.
Yes.
They had the best Krispies, I can tell you.
No doubt.
My brother just happened to call me, and I think I related this in our Wednesday morning section here.
Was that Walner's at that time when they moved there?
I don't remember. I would have been, I think I was 2 when my mother bought our property here in 1947. And I remember going there into the early 50s to get Krispies. And they were so good. But that's, they didn't last very long after that.
No.
So,
Again, society was changing, business strategies were changing, people began shopping at the bigger stores.
yeah.
Exactly.
I want to mention about Eloise. We moved here, we had 2 small children in 1950s, late 50s and 60s. I lived in her store. She sold men's swimming suits, women's, children's, Buster Brown children's clothes, little shoes, she had everything, and hairnets. I mean, she was just full of it, and she was so nice. I couldn't have gotten through the 60s without that one.
Not just you, but I remember reading an article that people said that, oh my gosh, it's the first day of school up the street,
Yeah.
so they go to Eloine's and they buy their pencils and books and everything, and notepads that they needed at her store, because it was close.
That's right.
Yeah, she was in business for 25 years, I think, close to 1976 or 78.
I was going to make one correction with regard to the building where yesterday's is. Max Corey opened a restaurant in Sioux Falls. He was an acquaintance of mine, and he started his restaurant business in Sioux Falls called First Edition. And he decided to opened in Sioux City then, under the parking ramp adjacent to what was the Hilton Hotel. And then he opted to open at Bokaboji, and he opened his restaurant where you said it was Maxwell's. It was still called the First Edition, and I don't know what the ladies' restroom looks like, but when you go into the men's restroom there, it's all done up in newspaper wallpaper. and then he eventually moved over to the top
Moved to the top of the
That's
apartment.
when Maxwell's opened in its place.
Right. Right. Yeah, restaurants, people always have the fondest memories of restaurants and spending the time there and then trying to pin a date, a date to your personal life to when you had a dinner there. I can't think of a business that's more fluid than a restaurant. They just keep coming and going. And, at some point, I'll probably try to write a definitive history of a lot of the restaurants. But, man, I mean, it's like trying to catch water. So,
Wasn't there, across from Claire's Clutter Closet, wasn't there a brick building across the street from Claire's? Is that where you're talking of the bakery? Like behind Murphy's?
That's behind Murphy's, yeah.
That would be, okay.
Yeah, it's down Allen Street, and it's actually behind the Smoking Jake's. I think there's a little gap, and then there's a building there, and I think it was visible in one photograph.
Well, wasn't there like an art studio or something?
Across the
Across the street
on the
from
other side
Claire's,
of
that's
the
what I
street.
was wondering. Do you have any idea who's in there before that?
just gonna say no, I don't know what was in the art building beforehand. I have a few ideas, and I know one of the owners, but she doesn't know either in the early days, so I can't tell you. So, but wouldn't it be great if we happen to have land records available to us, where a person could go try to find that out? Which, by the way, we do. So, a recent donation to the museum. So, all right, I think I'm going to stop our live feed now, and thank you all for coming.